Welcome to the Hip Hop Hustle podcast. We're back for another week. I'm extremely excited about my next guest, my current guest, the great artist Son Kuma. He just released a single. Let me get this straight. This came out. It's awesome. If you can't tell, I'm excited because I like your music, man. I think you've been doing interesting things from the very beginning. And I think we need to talk more about it. I feel like the more people that push their creativity, that challenge the status quo, the better it is. And man, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
When you make your music, let me ask, because I always wonder, is it something where you proactively go, I'm going to mix it up this time, or do you just search through your natural creativity?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I feel like it's changed a lot when I was like more amateur or learning how to make music. I would find myself like pushing myself to leave my comfort zone to like develop my craft and to search for my sound. So when I was like a, younger artist, if you will, I would just purposely like, okay, let me see if I can make something different now, right? Like, oh, I haven't made a dubstep track. Like, let me try that. And I still haven't. So that's kind of interesting. But after like maybe the third year of doing that, I got into a rhythm where I discovered my sound. I was like, okay, this is my sound. I had like maybe two or three sounds. So I was like, okay, I like these. And I kind of played with those for like 2 years. And then music got boring for me. Like something about it got boring. It was also like a drag and very like disheartening when you would put like a lot of money into your craft or a lot of money into something you're passionate about when you're investing and like you're not seeing the return. You know, during this time particularly was COVID. So I had a lot of plans. I was gonna go do my first international show in where was it? I think it was in Amsterdam. I was gonna do my first international show in Amsterdam. Yeah, for a 420 festival. And everything was paid for, and it was gonna be like a big moment for me. And then COVID happened and all the flights got canceled. And I remember that just like totally, that was like the beginning of my dip in momentum, which made music more boring. And in order for me to discover my passion, I had to once again leave my comfort zone and like try new things. So in that regard, once again, it was more of a conscious decision, like let me leave my comfort zone. And after making that conscious decision enough times, I realized the best music comes from like these spontaneous moments of like, let me just see what comes to mind. Like, let me just find some chords. What rhythm like am I naturally feeling when I hear this sample? And then sometimes that rhythm won't be a typical hip hop rhythm. Maybe it might be like an Afrobeat rhythm or even like a reggaeton rhythm or rock rhythm. There's different drum rhythms I feel like that can put me in a pocket as a vocalist. And then that might also influence what direction I go, you know?
It's interesting. It sounds like it comes from a place of you now trust yourself wholeheartedly to be like, I can just search without being like, I have to really be directional. Like you can kind of just trust your instinct more than you did before.
Yeah. Yeah. I think over time, I think, yeah, as artists, I like the way you put that. I think it's just getting comfortable in experimenting and trusting that you might get somewhere cool. So I like the way you put it. Yeah.
Do you think do you think it's hard for every artist to trust themselves?
I do think that, but I mean, what I've learned is it's not good to like assume, I guess, that everyone is the same. So, I might assume instead that there might be like an outlier here or there who they just naturally trust themselves. They're just like, I would think that's like the large minority, like it's or the small minority. It's not a lot of people. So yeah, I would think most artists, it just takes time. Now, how much time it takes depends.
Yeah, I think it comes with the territory. I think if you're creative and you're an artist, you tend to have the ability to overthink what you do. I think
Mm,
they like because typically you are conscious of what you're creating. You are like in your emotions, and the best art typically comes from emotion. It doesn't come from like just logic, which is also fascinating to me because it's very much like, hey, how can I express this authentically? How can I really search deep within myself to bring something out that resonates with people? I think that's why art in itself is so powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then just to like piggyback off that idea, the question is like, where are we going? Where are we getting these ideas from? Like we're searching deep within, but like where within? Because for some people it's a gut feeling. So they feel like it's in their gut. And a lot of people talk about how the stomach is like the second brain, you know? But like I don't know if you've heard that before, but
Yeah,
I
I
think that's
have.
very,
Yeah.
yeah. So some people will be like, oh, it's like it's a gut instinct. So that's where they're searching. And some people feel like, no, it's deep in your subconscious. It's like deep in your brain, but it's not part of your conscious brain. And it's like, well, maybe it's some combination of all of it, right? Um, I'm a big fan of like chakras, and I don't know much about chakras, but I know like what they are, the seven chakras. And then randomly, I was on Twitter one day and I'm like scrolling through Twitter and I saw this random tweet saying I'm a part of Black Twitter, so I got a lot of like I'm following a lot of people that are part of Black Twitter. So I see this one person tweet saying like, "Don't let them fool you," because Kamala is not black, right? And they're talking about like Kamala Harris, the
Yeah.
presidential. And I was like, "She's not." So I wanted to figure it out. So I start Googling, I start going down the Wikipedia rabbit hole, and I end up getting to like learning about Kamala Harris's mom, who was an endocrinologist. And I was like, okay, well, what's endocrinology? Like, I don't know what that is. So I looked that up and I learned about the endocrine system, which is essentially the system of all of our glands that release hormones and control our entire hormone system. And this diagram on Wikipedia that shows all of our major glands looks very similar to a chakra diagram. And I was like, whoa, like it's almost one to one in terms of like the major glands and the chakras. And I was like, this is such an interesting like connection that I've made. I feel like with like spiritualism and like with your body. And then when you think about art, I feel like art is something like in between that, where you're like bringing something that's like intangible into the tangible, into the real world, so other people can experience it, right? Or like bringing your vision to life, kind of a situation. So I think it's really cool. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of went on a long tangent there, but I'm kind of curious what you think about any of
No, I like it. Well, I'm going to ask you, did you get to the bottom of whether she is or isn't?
that. I think she is. I think her dad is half Jamaican. Um, Now, there's a lot of questions about like what's the definition of black. And so, because some people say like, well, just because he's Jamaican doesn't mean he's black. So I feel like I got to the as far as I could get to an answer without like doing some actual genealogy, which I'm not gonna do.
Well, to be fair, unless she does it, I think it's not your responsibility to do it. But
So
it is. It definitely is. It's so funny that it's also kind of weird to me the level that everyone's like, hey, I want to know your ancestry to a point where I can identify you. It's so weird to me. Like, why I just think, can we not just not move beyond that? Can we just not just go like, hey, like Son Kuma is just a fantastic guy? Can we just not? Can that not be the conversation? Yeah, I don't know. It does my head in sometimes, like all the labeling, and I'm like, we've gone label crazy.
yeah, I agree. Uh, yeah, I think it's
But
just like part of the human condition. We like to put names to things and helps us understand them, I guess.
yeah. Well, anyway, we're gonna move back to music because I think what you actually touched on was interesting in terms of like being able to draw energy from different places. And I do think it's all of it. Like I think if someone was like, I only draw from this, I would be like, well, you limit your options. Not to say it's wrong, but like you limit your feeling. I definitely think believing in your gut is important. Because I think the brain tries to trick you into logicking your decisions. I think it tries to, and you try to convince yourself of like, hey, something feels wrong about this, but I'm just being dumb. And so I'm going to continue. And I think we've all been there. I've been there many times, but I think we need to trust our instinct a bit more. I think we don't really acknowledge the power of our evolution that well. We're too smart to consider evolution, and that ironically is the dumbest thing ever because we've survived because we've evolved over time. And yeah, I think that's the piece that we miss is that we're just trying to overthink and not trust a little bit of like our natural sense, which the best music comes from our natural sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
What made you get into chakras?
Honestly, just my journey with spiritualism in general. I feel like I've always been a truth seeker, maybe since I was like 13, I guess. I was raised Catholic, and my nana, my grandma, she would like convince me to go to church by getting me gummy bears, which was like my favorite candy. And my real name is Baron, by the way. And Son Kuma, Kuma is Japanese for bear. And I always had an affinity for Japanese culture as well. We could get into that separately. But because bear was like my main animal that I kind of resonated with, I made Kuma my rap name. And then gummy bears are like one of my favorite candy. And they've been that way for a long time. So my nana would just convince me to go to church just by giving me gummy bears. But I didn't actually pay attention. I didn't really know what was going on. I never read the Bible. And then when I like turned 13, I remember I was like, or it wasn't like the day I turned 13, but I just remember being 13 in the car. And I'm like looking at the sky on my way to school. And I think to myself, like, I don't know. Right. Like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a God. That's kind of what the thought was. Like, and I remember it very vividly because like I then like had to just open my mouth and ask my mom, like, Mom, like, how do we know God's real? Right. And then she just said, Baron, like, not right now. Like it's early in the morning. I'm from Los Angeles. So every morning the traffic is terrible. I didn't realize what it was like to be an adult at that time. I just thought she was like shutting me down. But in reality, she realized it was a complicated question that she wasn't ready to answer. And I pretty much came to the conclusion, like, if there's no proof that there's a God, then why would there be a God? So I was essentially atheist from like 13 to 17, maybe, like majority of my like puberty years. And then I think when I was 18, I decided, okay, I'm not an atheist, because I think when I turned 18, and then let me tell you a little more about like you know, went through high school and discovered what my passions were. My passion was science, and I ended up going to college to study physics. So I became like this like physics guy. And then as I started learning more about the scientific method, I realized, okay, just because there's no evidence of something doesn't disprove something, right? This was like something I had to realize through like a deep philosophy class. And it also made me realize like, well, I can just admit that I don't know. And so I became agnostic, right? And I was like, okay, now I'm agnostic. I'm not atheist. Then I like developed more of my spiritualism. And I think like it was a couple years later, it wasn't too long after, maybe 2 years later, that I came to the conclusion. I don't remember how I came to this conclusion. I'll have to think about it, but I realized that the odds that there is something, right? It doesn't have to be like a God or the definition of whatever we've called it as humans, that there's something greater than us is actually a lot higher than the odds that there isn't, just because of the vastness of the universe. And I thought more about how even if the universe itself is an organism, so kind of like in the sense of like the hive mind, there could be like a hive mind. Well, theoretically, if you combine everything together, that could be the universe. And then if you think about the Big Bang Theory, if that's true, at one point, everything that's all spread apart was just in one point, was just one at one time, right? So then theoretically, the universe could be God. We could all be God, like a part of God could be all of us. And that kind of also, I like that idea because it resonated a lot with a lot of religions who say, oh, like there's a part of God within all of us, right? So then with that conclusion, I felt like, okay, with this, I can now go into the world of spiritualism and like search, and I can search all the religions and figure out which ones are most interesting to me. Now, Hinduism is extremely interesting to me for many reasons. I really like their their three gods, like their three main gods, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer. I just like that idea, to create, to preserve, and to destroy. I'm like, totally makes sense. By the way, not to get off track, when I was learning about the endocrine system and how it links with chakras, the endocrine system, a lot of it has to do with breaking down your food and getting energy and supplying energy to your cells, which control everything when it comes to replicating your cells and then destroying your cells, right? So the whole system is based on anabolic, to create, metabolic, to preserve, and catabolic, to destroy. And I was like, whoa, it's all linked. So once again, just like another connection, I was like, oh, like that's so interesting. So anyway, yeah, when I got into Hinduism, it led me to the chakras. I started learning about the chakras. I didn't get too deep into it, but I liked the idea of like separating these like parts of our energy and like where they come from and what they might represent and how they can link to physical body parts. Because I'm a big fan. Remember, I kind of started this whole thing by linking the spiritual world with the physical world, because I feel like there must be some one-to-one ratio or relationship. Sorry. Yeah. So that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah. As you went through it, the thing that I'm picking up about you is like you're constantly questioning your ideas, you're constantly questioning your beliefs, and you're constantly questioning your thoughts. Like that, and that is really interesting to me. I think it's difficult to do and it's uncomfortable to do because you essentially consistently are ending up in a place where it's like, oh, I don't know. Or
Mhm.
am I right? Or maybe I'm not as right as I think I was. And for you to do that on a consistent basis is difficult, like, especially with the existential questions. I know that I think for most people, when they start arriving at those questions, that's when you start to question, well, if the foundational belief that I was told isn't correct, what does that mean for the rest of my life? What does that
Mhm.
mean for then how I view the world, how I view right and wrong, how I view the society that I live in? All of those questions naturally filter through. And I think it's really interesting that that's a journey you went through and you're still going through.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Uh, it is scary. Um, it was like I think for me, I was lucky because I was kind of thrown into a religion early without being really told why, or I wasn't convinced too hard of the religion. I was just convinced to go using gummy bears. And so for me, it was easy to just let go of it and accept that I knew nothing, or accept that, well, actually, no, let me correct that. I didn't accept that I know nothing. I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew, no, there's no God, for a long time. I think a lot of it has to do also with my science background, because as a scientist, you're pretty much constantly told, no, you're probably wrong. Most of the time, you're wrong. Scientists are almost always wrong. There's like a very few times where they're right, and those are the moments where it's like, oh, we have a breakthrough, we figured it out. In order for them to discover the acceleration due to gravity, that, like, the actual number, that took a lot of experimentation. I mean, just took constant chugging. And I feel like that is the mindset that's helped me also just be willing to be like, okay, I'm probably wrong, and we're probably all wrong, and that's okay, because we're like on this journey for truth. And I think the journey, once people accept that the journey is the fun part, it becomes fun to like admit I'm wrong, because if you're admitting you're wrong, there must be a reason why. New information.
Yeah. Well, I think I've started talking to people, and when they disagree with me, I always say to them, like, hey, if there was overwhelming proof that you were wrong, would you change your mind? And if they say no, then there's no point talking anymore, because
Mm,
that is like, and I think there are lots of people like that. They're just like, nope, I've decided. And it's like, but what if the other side was just, what if you were wrong? Like, mate, you might not be, you might be right. And you might have overwhelming proof that I'm wrong. But I think we have to enter world and we have to enter discussions to be like, hey, maybe I could be wrong. And I think if we did that, we would be all significantly better placed, because we would be like just listening more and more considerate of others, and just like, oh, I hadn't thought of that view before, or I haven't thought of that perspective before. I haven't realized those things were true and those things were not, any of the above. So yeah, I think that's the right place to be, is just to be open to discovering the new thing and being wrong. Like you said, being wrong is not a bad thing. It's just that you learned something and your views changed. That's actually a really good thing, to be wrong, because that means you're growing and you're learning.
yeah. And I echo your sentiment about, like, yeah, if more people had that, then it'd be easier. Also, people will be more open-minded. Uh, People will be more willing to just learn about each other. And like, even like when it comes to just major conflicts, which I don't want to get into, but like, I'm always trying to figure out both sides. Like, I'm always trying to like know, okay, there's a reason why they're doing, even if they're like doing terrible things, right? I don't want to like say who or what, but if there's any kind of major conflict anywhere, and like one is like more aggressive than the other, I still want to know why, you know? And I feel like sometimes I'll ask that question, and then I'll have some people, they'll be like, why does it matter? And it's hard for me to answer that question sometimes, because I feel like it comes from a place of like ethical righteousness, or it comes from a place of like what what can I say at that point to someone who comes from that place?
Yeah.
If I want to know why someone is doing something, I think like no matter what I say or no matter what reason I give, I feel like they're gonna make a judgment, and then So it's also, I think it does this thing where because of society, judgments, people don't want to question things as much. And they just want to kind of go with the flow or go with the hive mind. Just let's go with what everyone else thinks because it's the safe thing to do.
Well, I think that's why it's important for you to still ask, because
Mm.
that is in essence where the danger is. The danger is in the fear of being outcast. That's self-censorship. And, one of my favorite books is 1984. It's an awesome book. It's all about the control of government and state. And part of what they do is they get you to censor yourself in the sense of the values that they impose are no longer just imposed by them, they're imposed by the individuals upon themselves. And so this hive mind is, to me, quite dangerous because it doesn't allow you to ask questions and be like, hey, can someone explain this to me? It's important because it helps me further my understanding. Not that's why I'm asking. You're not asking to prove a point. You're just going, hey, I don't particularly understand this. And that's why I'm asking. I want someone to explain it to me. And if you don't understand it, that's probably a good thing to identify because then you probably need to figure that out as well. So I just think that as soon as we start limiting the questions we can ask, that's problematic.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think we can do about it, or like about the hive mind?
Well, I don't think we can do anything other than just ask and talk and not self-censor. Like the obligation, and there are lots of people who speak about this on all the different sides of like, you have free speech. Your duty is actually to use your free speech. That's what it's there for. And like all the critical thinkers of any generation were always disliked. Like every single one. Like you look at anyone who shaped society, they were always the outliers. They were always the person who were like, man, that you sound insane. That's what they were told consistently. And then over time, their ideas become so invaluable, but they only became invaluable later. But imagine if they didn't say those things. Imagine if they didn't write the things that they wrote. Then you would be like, well, where would we be in today? We would just be in our hive mind, in our limited view because we didn't want to hear it. So I think the only obligation we each have is to continue to speak and ask questions and try wholeheartedly to be like, hey, help me understand.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Which is why on this show, like, I want you to be able to speak freely. That's the
Yeah.
whole point, is so that you can be you and you can explore. And then, hopefully people get a connection of like, what is the artist behind the music they create. I think it's really difficult sometimes. You're like, oh, the music is awesome. I wonder about this artist. I wonder how they feel. I wonder what they think. And so, like, I didn't even know, you studied physics in university. That's really cool. It's like not a thing that ever goes hand in hand, like musician and physics. That's a unique combination. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, a lot of people tell me that, which I think that's like the main selling point I'm trying to make of my artistry, I guess. I feel like every artist needs a selling point. We all have a product. But I don't know. It's kind of difficult to package it. So for the most part, it seems still separate.
Well, it's the musician who knows the laws of the universe.
Mm. Tell me more.
Well, that's you. That's physics. Physics is like the inalienable. I can't even say that word. Um, but yeah, it's the laws of the universe. That's what physics is, right? That's like
Yeah.
that. If there are any laws that cannot be broken, it's physics.
Yeah. It's the attempt at the laws of the universe
Yeah.
because there's a lot of foundational aspects of it that are starting to break down, like literally like this year.
Really?
Yeah. I just watched a podcast talking about it. The podcast is called the what's it called? I watch a lot of podcasts. I enjoy podcasts actually. Um the World Science Festival, something like that. It's on YouTube, hosted by Brian Greene. So people should be able to find it just from that. And they're discussing quantum computers and how they've had new breakthroughs with their quantum computers, particularly Google's quantum computers. And it's just a lot of it has to do with some stuff Einstein figured out back in the day. But essentially what it means is, particles can communicate or share information, but they can be super far apart, like ridiculously far apart, and they can share this information instantly, which goes against Einstein's, theory of special relativity, which is that the speed of light is constant and that that's the speed limit of the universe. Nothing can go faster than the speed of light. But this would technically like completely break that concept, which is funny because it's Einstein's second or maybe like fourth big concept, which goes against his first big concept. His first big concept was speed of light, but his like fourth big concept was about entanglement, which is this idea that these particles are entangled from super far away and they can share information regardless of the speed of light. So his whole theory was, yeah, I figured this out, but I did it to tell you that all of your foundations are wrong when it comes to quantum mechanics. So his whole purpose of doing that was to show them that their foundations were wrong because their foundations led to this idea of entanglement. But quantum computers are actually proving that it's probably true. Entanglement's real. And now we're trying to figure out applications with it, and they haven't really done that yet. But the point being is like sometimes the foundations just might be wrong. And the laws of physics change a lot. Because pre-Einstein, the laws of physics were very different.
Yeah. Isn't it weird though that the laws aren't different? Our understanding of them is.
Okay. I'll take that. Yes. I'll take that.
Yeah. Because we're just discovering the truth consistently. That's what it is. It's like the mystery of how the world works is the constant thing on humans' mind. That's the weird thing about us as humans that I constantly find is like we're never satisfied. Like we're always like, I want to know more and more and more and more and more. And so in knowing more, we just like go, oh no, all of that stuff we thought we knew that was wrong. So we have to rewrite it all. We have to rewrite history. We have to rewrite books. Like think about the overwhelming concept of that. Like once the foundational knowledge of physics is wrong, that means that you have to rewrite all the books that anyone reads. You have to like teach it from scratch again. Like that's a really overwhelming move on in terms of like what does that mean for the rest of society? Like that's pretty crazy.
No, I hear you. And yeah, in that regard, rather than wrong, we could just say like imprecise. I think imprecise is like more accurate because then we're just getting more precise, more and more precise. Because it's not that they're wrong, they're precise to a degree. Matter of fact, they're precise enough for us to have this conversation via this computer. But we're getting more precise. And I feel like as precision increases, our understanding of why things work the way they work changes. And then we can, as you said, we can have more advances. I feel like we get more developments.
What are your thoughts on AI? I'm interested to think about what you've thought about, especially considering how quickly it's evolved. I think it came out this time last year, and it seems like the evolution in the space of 12 months has been exponential.
Yeah. Do you want more of my thoughts on AI as a technology or AI as like the consequences of AI? Because I've thought about both kind of separately,
Whichever resonates to you.
I'll talk about the consequences because I think I've been talking a lot of technology science for a minute. We'll talk about because a lot of people you have some people who are thinking like, oh, AI is the beginning of the end for all these different reasons. And then you have people saying, no, AI is the beginning of something beautiful, right? For all these other reasons. And I had a friend who told me like, usually it's not one or the other, it's some mixture of the two. And I've kind of taken that with me ever since he told me that. And I kind of agree in this regard as well. I think it's a mixture of the two. It's going to have bad consequences and good consequences. And I think the main question is who are the stakeholders and who are the ones that are making the decisions? And those are the questions I think that are the most interesting because it's hard to get to those answers. But the answers technically do exist. The answers to the other questions we'll never know until it happens. No one can predict the future, and the future is constantly changing. So yeah, I've thought a lot about like who's really spearheading this movement of AI and how long has AI really been around? Because that's the other thing. Like I'm a firm believer that technology, when it makes its way into society, it's already been around for at least 10 years. Um, like maybe not as advanced, but I would think AI has been around already and they've been using it for different reasons. And then, oh, here's something else I was thinking. I was talking to my girlfriend about this the other day. I was like, you know how our phones always listen to us and they've been listening to us for a long time. I mean, now they've definitely just put the AI in there. So now the phone's listening to us, they're logging our conversation, and then you could have like an Instagram, just AI ask it, like a chat GPT. Hey, what's Son Kuma been talking about lately? Oh, he's been talking about jet skiing. Perfect. Let's go ahead and show him some ads for jet skiing. Like it could be as simple as that, right? Of like recently, what has this person been doing? And it just automates everything to the point where it's like every single thing is automated at that point. So yeah, definitely a lot of jobs will be lost. I think that'll be a for sure consequence. And I think it's now this is where my conspiracy mind kind of gets into it, but I do think some of the people who are spearheading this do have negative intentions. Um, and I think the negative intentions include like population control, which is kind of, like I said, like that's my more conspiracy minded. We can get there if you want. I'm totally open. But yeah, that's kind of where those are my thoughts on the consequences of AI.
Yeah. See, I find myself in a similar boat to you with AI. Is I just don't know who are the people who's controlling it. So like technology in its essence by itself isn't good or bad, but it's how it's used and by who that it's used by is essentially how you discover whether it's good or bad. And what I find myself constantly thinking is who's making it, who's controlling it, what are they pushing? Like no one's unbiased. That's what's weird to me. Is like no human is unbiased. And so they're going to have preordained checks and things that they want in the AI. And then if we become reliant on that, what does that mean? Like a certain story gets pushed. Like that whole thing is problematic to me. It's the hive mind again. It's like you get pushed a certain story or pushed a certain narrative, and that becomes truth.
Mhm.
And I find that worrying more than anything else is that, and there's so many conversations around this, around like, how do you regulate an industry that doesn't really exist? That's the difficult part. Like, so that's what worries me more than anything else is who will end up controlling the AI. And then once you control it, like it's like you're in the Matrix. Like you get to pull all the levers, you get to say, hey, I don't want this shown anymore. Hey, I don't want that shown anymore. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden you get a very controlled view of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. It's scary. And no one can predict what's gonna happen. Some of the some of the music consequences I think are interesting too. Like I've talked to a lot of artists, not even just of music, but like graphic artists. I got like a lot of people in the film industry, a lot of friends in the film industry that are scared about it because it's so powerful, such a powerful tool. And artists are afraid that they're like being replaced at this point. And I have never honestly subscribed to the idea. I've always pushed against that idea because I think no matter what, this is kind of just an unfounded belief. And I can admit that it might be wrong. But my general belief is that AI will never, there will always be something humans have that AI won't have. Let's just put it that way. And because I have that belief, I think that one thing, whatever that thing is humans have, will be the separating factor. And so therefore, even if AI becomes an integral part of creating art, there will always be some human with a really good idea behind it. That's kind of so I've never subscribed to that idea.
I
But what are
tend
your
to
thoughts?
agree. I tend to agree with you. I think
Okay.
it's problematic in the sense that it will continue to oversaturate the industry. That's what
Mhm.
I think is problematic. So I think 100% it will be really easy for everyone to create art. You will be able to go in and say, make this thing for me, and AI will be able to generate it. But what it doesn't do is take into account human creativity. And there's something to me that is underrated about time and the time that it takes to create a masterpiece. It
Mhm.
takes time. Yeah, I can't explain why, but there is something to a piece of art that has taken 12 months to make. the labor, the sweat, the emotional torment that the artist has had to go through over the journey to make that piece is in it. You can't really replicate that in 12 seconds of robotics.
Yeah.
So to me, there's something about that. And it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. It goes back to feeling, comes back to emotion. It comes back to like our raw instinct of like, when you look at a piece of art, why does that make me feel sad? Or why does this song make me feel happy? That's because the artist has poured something of themselves into it. That's like the authenticity that I don't think can be replaced. But I think what people should be worried about is the popcorn kind of like easy snack art can be replaced, because anyone will be able to make it. Anyone with an idea and a computer will be able to go, hey, make this type of thing for me, and it'll just generate. So I think it depends what you make. And if you're making depth, and if you're creating with depth, and you're creating with emotion, then I think you shouldn't be worried, because there will always be a place for that.
That's a good point. No, thank you for saying that, because I wasn't really thinking about it in that in regard, at least in terms of like the story behind it. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like the story, I think, is such an integral element.
Because we're just seeking connection. Like when you look at everything we do, it's almost a foundational way of like, we just want to connect with others. We want to be validated. We want to have a community. We want to, like, all those things. It comes down to foundational of like who I am as a person, and I don't want to feel alone. That's why people are doing the things that they're doing. And when you see it like that, you're like, of course you're doing silly things, or of course you're doing risky things. It's because you just want to feel accepted and part of something. And so that's why art and music and all of that is important. That's why films are important. And that's why, like, you know, any of this stuff that is here 1 second, gone the next, isn't really good, but it's the stuff that stays over time, the stuff that resonates with people. That's the stuff that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I also have some other thoughts on AI in terms of like what it might be capable of in the future.
Yeah.
But I still don't know. I've thought about like its uses in science a lot, specifically in like chemistry. There's this interesting concept about the periodic table of elements, which is that, you know, so of course we have all these elements and they change by number of proton, but you can also change the number of neutrons, the neutral particle that's inside of the nucleus. And you can add as many neutrons to something as you want, and it'll still be the same element, because the protons is what determines the number of the element. Now, these isotopes, or, you know, different elements with, or same element with different numbers of neutrons, they have different properties. And some of them are stable, a lot of them are unstable. So they just decay. But there's this like concept, this theoretical concept, it's called the sea of stability within the periodic table of elements. And this idea that like very deep into the periodic table of elements, you find super heavy elements where there are some stable isotopes that we haven't discovered. And these elements, who knows what they could be used for, because we just haven't gotten to that point. Our technology to actually create the element, it just does not exist. We're not there yet. So part of my thinking is with AI is if we can make AI really good at understanding isotopes and elements and what happens when they interact, I feel like it could really unlock chemistry. I think chemistry is, I've always believed this as a physicist. I've always believed that chemistry is really the key to unlocking everything. Especially when it comes to just human interaction with the world, because chemistry is kind of what connects physics and biology in that regard, right? So I find that pretty interesting. So that's just my last little spiel on AI.
Would you go into chemistry?
Yeah, I would actually. I've thought about, if I go to grad school, I thought like I might switch to like chemistry or maybe math, but yeah.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you switch? Why would you stay with physics?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think it would just depend. I think I might have to get a master's in chemistry first and then get a PhD, because I don't have any degrees in chemistry. So I have like a bachelor's in physics. And I feel like if I were to apply like PhD in chemistry with a bachelor in physics, they might like be like, huh? Like that doesn't make sense. So I might have, it might just be a different route, which is why, and it might be easier to just go the physics route. If I were to go the grad school route, I've already kind of decided I'm not going to go grad school. Unless like I make it big as a musician, because I feel like I wouldn't want to really Or fine, actually, I'll change that. Not necessarily that, but I want to chase being a musician first, if that makes sense. So grad school is not going to happen to me for a long time.
Yeah.
If
Yeah. It's funny that you're like, it doesn't make sense to go from physics to chemistry. And then based on what you just told me, I'm like, makes sense to me. like, like it makes sense based on what you just laid out to me. That does make sense to me. Um, yeah. I don't know.
I think
Again,
it's like,
yeah, please.
I was going to say, I think it's like academia, like this just general worldview within academia of like everything is separate. If you haven't gone deep into chemistry, like who are you to just like come into here without like doing the foundations first? I think a lot of it is some of that low key, where it's like you have to prove yourself. You have to go through the, you know.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in the world. Just like it's like you have to suffer like the rest of us
Mm-hmm.
to have a voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. See, you're interesting. That's the whole point. Like I never would have guessed that you had these world views. I never would have guessed that we would go on this rabbit hole. Like people always ask me, like, what do you talk about? And I'm always like, I have no idea. We kind of just talk and we find the things that make sense. Like, how do you have a normal conversation? That's essentially all this is. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you find you talk about that stuff a lot? Like, do you get to talk about the world and science and like your your views? Because I imagine like, you know, it's probably not the questions you get asked being a musician.
Yeah. That's a good point. I've most of my friends, um, it's funny. I feel like my friends take breaks from me. Like they'll be like yeah, like they'll like disappear for like 2 weeks. And then when they come back, they have all these things they want to talk about, and they want to get my opinion on them. So I feel like I've become that guy for a lot of people. Like, oh, like it's time to talk about my worldviews again. Where's Son Kuma? Um, but yeah, when I'm out and about and just meeting people, yeah, we don't get to this place. We're just having very normal surface level kind of conversation, which is my least favorite type of conversation to have. It feels very fake and it feels like I'm gonna forget a lot of that information. Like later. Because I just don't remember that stuff. I don't commit it to memory. Unless there's like a really interesting story behind you. If I'm meeting someone out and about at like a networking event and we're just having small talk, I'm like, you're not gonna remember any of this. I'm not gonna remember anything you're saying either, unless we say something that's like worth remembering. So we shouldn't talk about where we're from unless there's something really interesting about that story. And we shouldn't talk about like what kind of music we make unless there's something interesting about the story, and there usually isn't. That's always the first question I get asked as a musician. It's like, oh, what kind of music do you make? I hate that question. I think that question is so like, it's just there's no answer that a musician can give you that's going to actually help you, except for like I could tell you a genre and then now you've boxed me in, kind of similar to what you're saying earlier about everyone just wants to like box people into like, oh, okay, you're this, okay, you're that. It's like I make so many different styles of music that it annoys me to have to answer that question and then tell them like, oh yeah, I make all types of music. Sometimes I make rock, sometimes I make R&B, sometimes I make hip-hop, because they never dive deeper. Like they don't want to dive deeper into that. If anything, they're a little annoyed by that answer because it's not helping them. It's not helping them box you in. So yeah,
Yeah.
to answer your question, yeah, I don't usually get to talk about this stuff.
I am annoyed just like you with that question. That question is the worst question to ask a musician because I 100% agree. Like
Yeah.
the more people I speak to, the more I'm like, you just make Son Kuma's music. Like I just make my own music. That's it. I can't tell you what that is. That's for you to figure out. But I just
Right.
make whatever I feel like. So it has elements of all these things, but I just make my own music. Like that, I think that's the way we have to keep talking. But I get it. It's hard to be on like a playlist and it's hard to be on like all these things if you don't describe exactly to a T what genre you fit in. I think yeah, I don't know. It's weird to me because then as soon as you're labeled that one thing and you shift outside that box, then everyone's like, hey, wait a minute. You told me you make X music and now you're making Y music. That's not what you told me
Yeah.
you do.
And actually, I'm sorry, I want to piggyback on that because this is something this has really been bothering me lately. It's the entitlement of like fans and supporters. Supporters have this entitlement where like if they discovered you from one style, like if you don't make that style again, they might just say you fell off. Like, and I'm just like, yo, I don't want to make lo-fi music anymore. Sorry. Um, but like, I just think that's very interesting. Like, my thing is this: enjoy the song. The song exists. The song is right there. Like, if that's what you want to listen to, enjoy it. But people are so, or like supporters these days are so entitled, and I don't blame them. I blame the system. Like, everyone has access to all the music for $10.99 a month or whatever price it costs now. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, I could listen to your song, but I'm gonna get tired of it because I've already heard it like 100 times, bro. Like, so make me another one. Or I'm gonna go find another artist to listen to, right? Who will deliver. Because there are some artists who are down to be boxed in. I've met a lot of talented artists who have told me they're down to be boxed in, which is interesting. And I think it's because it's easier. It's a lot easier for as an artist. If you know you're just making the same style every time, you get really good at it. And it becomes easy and efficient. But for me, it doesn't become fun anymore. It's not fun anymore. So
it's the guaranteed fan base. It's the guaranteed, you know what you can expect, which is,
yeah.
I know if I do a show, I'm going to get people there. I know that if I drop an album, I'm probably going to get X amount of listens. I know it's just, I can now plan very easily to know exactly what I can expect. So all I need to do is I do this equals this outcome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Now now I have the ticket to just, how do I make music for the rest of my life? And that's my job. It very much is like, how do I retain sustainability, and and that's actually what I understand is like, you want to be in a comfortable place. You're like, you know what? Fine. I figured it out. And now I'm going to stick to that methodology, and I'm just going to keep doing it until it no longer works. And part of me is like, okay, I kind of respect that, because you're like, I found my own way of making it work. I get boxed in. I just do the same thing. Maybe it's not as what I wanted originally, which is to have like this experience and be really fulfilled, but it's better than the other reality of like not being able to do this full time. So I'll take it. And so that's what they do. So I think it comes to a point of like, what are you continually willing to risk, and what are you in it for? Some people are just like, I think I'm tired of pushing myself. I'm tired of not knowing. And then it's the seeking the sustainability and seeking the, okay, I know what's coming next. I know when I drop, I'm going to get this. I know the people are going to like this. I know I'm going to get XYZ fans to do certain behaviors. So I think all of that plays into some artists just being like, fuck it. It's fine. I'll do that.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's definitely what it has become. And wow. It's like, I think that touches on something deep for me, which is like the question of, am I doing this to be a musician or a music artist, or is it deeper than that? There was like, I've called myself different things throughout my music career. Like, I started with rapper. I would just tell people I'm a rapper. Then I started telling people I'm a music artist. Then I started telling people that I'm like just an artist, right? So I felt like I kept trying to make it more general. But then I got to the point where I realized, okay, no, but if I tell people I'm an artist, sometimes they assume I'm like a different type of artist than a music artist. So I settled on recording artist. I think recording artist is the best title for me because I'm a vocalist and I record the music. And I want that to be the thing that I want. I want supporters, not necessarily for the genre. I don't want you to like my music for the vibe necessarily. I want you to like it because of what I'm saying. I want you to like it because of what I'm bringing to it. And I do think there's a lot of artists who are like being carried by their production as well, because there's a lot of good production out there. And then, I mean, just to give an example, and no hate, because I actually do like Ice Spice. No hate to Ice Spice. I love Ice Spice. But her most recent song, it's going viral on TikTok. The beat, amazing. The beat, like, oh, chef's kiss. So reminiscent, nostalgia vibes. It's what everyone wants right now. But her vocals are just all right. It's just all right. It's good. She did a decent job, but she definitely didn't make the song. You know what I'm saying? The song was made by the beat. And so now to the point where people are the part that's going viral is just the beat. It's not even her voice anymore. People are like commenting saying like, oh yeah, this beat is amazing. Like, oh my God, this is such an amazing beat. Like, I love this. And then people are saying like, yeah, Ice Spice kind of ruined the song low key. Like someone, if you get deep enough into the comments, you'll find hate comments like that. But I do think there's a little bit of truth there in terms of like the beats are so good that the artists don't feel like they need to do their job anymore. They don't need to like bring something new to the table. Like I just do the same thing I always do. The beats fire, beautiful. So with me, I think a lot of it also is like I like to be hands-on with the beats because then I feel like I'm forcing myself to get involved on all aspects. But I'm not going to call myself a producer. I'll just call myself the recording artist. That's fine. But you'll know that it's me because there's something there that you've never heard before, you know?
You
Kind
know
of
what
vibe.
that reminds me of? It reminds me of French Montana. French
Interesting.
Montana, he has I think he has the best ear in hip hop
Okay.
because he, without a doubt, every song, his beats and production selection and the producers he works with
Mm.
make
Okay.
the best beats. Without a doubt. Like you go to any one of French Montana's songs and you're like, this beat is unbelievable. And so
Yeah.
that's his talent. His talent is I know how to find the best beats, the best produce. Like I just know. And if you listen to what he says on half his songs, he says nothing. Like I'm never blown away by what he says, but I'm like the fact that you found and it's amazing because I'm
And
like,
I expect you to go this way. This is just funny to me.
well, it's genuinely amazing because I'm like, that's your skill. Your skill is you found a way to make fire songs, but you found it because you recognize what beats are awesome. And I'm like, fair play to you. Fair play, because I see what you've done. You're not blowing anyone away with your pen. Like, no one's talking about French Montana's got the best pen or he's killing anyone with his bars. And I'm
That's why
sure
when you
he,
said Montana first, I was like, huh? And then no, but then you
yeah.
got to, I was like, okay, that's hilarious.
And literally, I like, and I'm sure he knows it as well. I'm sure deep down he's like, I'm not killing anyone with my pen, but he knows how to make hits. He has the great ear. And
Yeah.
to me, that's like, oh, that's just you figuring out your art. Your art is utilizing what you've got. What you've got is a fantastic ear. But I'm with you. Like, I think sometimes we get suckered into believing that an artist is great when it's actually the other artist who made the beat that's fantastic. But yeah, I think we do get confused. Sometimes we're like, oh, this person's awesome. It's like, well, are they awesome or is the beat awesome? And it might be a combination of the two, but yeah, I feel that way sometimes about French Montana. I'm like, oh, another fire beat. That's what you've, and I'm gonna keep playing it because the beat is fire.
Yeah. That's funny. That's funny. That's very true. That's very true. I, I feel like there's just like a running joke in most circles about French Montana. Like just French Montana, man. It's the same. He got hits. No one can deny that. He got lots of hits, but like you said, it's never really because of him. It's like the beat or the feature or both. He'll always do his job. So I give him props for that. He's not a bad musician by any means,
No,
but he's just good enough. He's just good enough to like make sure that the song will come out okay, you know?
he's got the ear. Like,
Yeah.
because there are so many artists with great pens and they have shitty beats. And I'm like, pick
Hmm.
a good beat. It ruins it. Like, and his ear is what I think everyone wishes they had. Like, he just knows he can hear a song and he knows this is a hit. That's what he knows. He knows that this is what people are going to resonate with. Like, he just knows how to find those things. And I'm sure he knows and he's probably tuned in with all the producers that are hot. He's just in tune with all of that. And then there are some artists who are just like, you're good, but like, where's the production value? Where's the crisp sound? Where's the thing that brings your voice out in this? And I think that's a missing piece with some artists on the flip side is like, you're just not doing yourself any favors by choosing the beats that you're choosing. You're just choosing any beat and just rapping over it and thinking that's going to land, and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, the ear's tough. Ear's tough. And there's definitely levels to it, you know. Like I wouldn't say like my ear is the best per se, but I wouldn't say it's a bad ear. I have a pretty good ear, but it's not the best. Like I can admit some people have better ears than me, and French Montana is definitely one of those people. And I got another homie who's like really good. Like he's a producer homie. And I know he has a good ear because he'll pick samples that I wouldn't pick. and then he'll like make the beat, and then I'll be like, oh wow, this is very good. Like it'll be after the fact, like he saw something that I didn't see. So yeah, I think that's very interesting. Everyone definitely has their own niche within music, is what I've started to learn as I meet more musicians. Even like just the best of the best, they'll usually be like really like, I wish there was a way to break it down by all the different skills that are associated with it. But usually people have like two or three, like the best of the best, they might have two or three things that they're like literally the best at. And then the other ones they're really good at. But you can still find somebody who's better, like a Fresh Montana who just has a really good ear.
Yeah. Well, I think that's art in general, is like you need to find your thing that you're the best at. And the other things you need to be good enough for you to be able to like get through it. But like if you can exploit your strengths to the max, that's what will set you apart. And I think sometimes at school we get taught the opposite, which is always work on your weaknesses. Whereas if you worked on your strengths, you would be so much better. Like you would just be like exponentially better, and just figure out a way to exploit those strengths so much. And then the others, you just got to get good enough, just enough to be like, okay, that's fine. Because I agree. I think every artist is different. Every artist has their strengths, and you should lean into your strengths, not into your weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree. That's good advice, actually. So hopefully any artists that are listening actually do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just hard. It's like you just see so many people blowing up, and you just see them doing things that you and is not naturally you, and so they just feel like they have to. It's the pressure.
Yep. Definitely met people like that. It bothers me.
Oh man, it feels like you don't really seem to get bothered by the pressure though. Like you seem to be able to like at this stage in your career like trust yourself and be like, nah, I'm just doing it my way. I'm going to trust my own vision.
Yeah. Confidence is a big element for that. Yeah. I don't know. There was a moment, I don't know when this moment was. It was recent though. It was this year. I had a moment this year. So, and I'm 7 years in now to making music. I started 2017. I've been making music for a long, long, long time, but I started seriously as Son Kuma in 2017. So it's been, 7 years now. And finally I had this moment, and I was telling my roommate, because he also makes music and he's a TikToker as well. And I told him, I was like, I think I hit my 10,000th hour. And he was like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, I think I hit it. I think I hit that 10,000th hour. And it was from that moment on where it felt like anything I did was just like amazing. And like I said, it happened this year. So a lot of it is yet to see like the light of day. It's like I'm still sitting on it. But ever since that moment, I realized, oh, I'm one of them. Like I'm one of them. I'm one of the best. All I got to do is keep walking the path. And I've told some of my other friends this too. Like, think about where you are right now and think about how good you are. And then ask yourself 5 years from now, who's going to be where you are at if you keep this up? Not many people. Only the people that are where you're at right now are going to still even have a chance to be where you're at. Right. And then the people above you, of course. Right. But people that are older than you, 5 years from now, some of them are going to retire. There's going to be openings. And so I think like I have a lot of friends who are musicians. We're getting older. I'm 27. Rappers, once you hit 30, people are saying, bro, what are you doing? It's a young man sport. You got 16-year-old rappers that are killing it, half your age. But there's something we have that they don't have, and that's experience. And I think that's where we have to come with that, because there's a lot of older people who are listening to new music now because of Spotify. I think that's one of the benefits of the new environment. One of the few benefits is that I think, you have like I have 50-year-old people who listen to my music, which is very interesting because I make hip hop rap, right? If you were to put it into a genre. And when I was growing up, I didn't know a lot of 50-year-olds listening to hip hop and rap. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think as older musicians, that's what we have to kind of do. We have to use our experience to kind of beat out the younger people who are very talented. Not that it's a competition, but it kind of is. So,
Well, it definitely is a bit of a competition, especially in hip hop. But 50, I mean, hip hop turned 50. So it's not surprising that you have 50-year-olds who listen to hip hop. And when I look at all the big artists, like they're still selling, like they're 30 plus. They're all the ones. Snoop Dogg is almost as big as he's ever been.
Yeah.
And you
But
know,
not for
not
for
for the
music.
music, but Eminem is still killing it. You know, oh, what's his name? He won the Grammy for Hip Hop Album of the Year last year.
Uh,
Um, oh, I forget his
yeah,
name.
Killer Mike. Killer
Yeah,
Mike.
Killer Mike. Yeah, Killer Mike. He's not a young man.
Yeah,
He's been
he's
making
older.
hip hop for ages. You know, all these artists are still killing it, and they're still making really good music. I think it's a bit of a fallacy now that hip hop is a young man's game. It is when you're talking about the evolution of hip hop. Like those artists typically don't follow the trends. But they still make good music. Nas is still making fire music. Like Nas is coming out with absolute bangers. Like he's just going hard. His pen is still unbelievable. Like all those people are still making fantastic music. So I genuinely am like, you shouldn't get caught in the trap of it's only a young man's game, because you start telling yourself that and then you start questioning your own ability. Because you're right, man. You spend 10,000 hours at this, you're going to be better than the 16-year-old who spent 1,000 hours at it. It's just basic maths. Like you just look at that and you're like, of course you're going to be better. The skill set's going to be better. But you have to look at skill set and not necessarily clout. They're not the same. You just have to be like, you know, it just may not be as it may not pull the same way, but you will 100% be better. It's the same with any art form. Like I look at this and I'm like, I've only done 200 episodes. And then others are like, man, you've done 200 episodes. So like it's both. And then I look at the best podcasters and they're in their thousands. And I'm like, the difference between me and them is significant. But then the difference between me and the people who just did their first one or just did 30, that gap is significant as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like how you put that. And yeah, no, like with the age stuff, the biggest thing for me was like, yeah, when I hit my 10,000 hour, the confidence that came with it, I think, was something I was always a very confident person, but this confidence was like, it's a security. So it's almost more of a security than a confidence. It's like, I know that no matter what, you could put me in a studio and I'll come out with a hit. And I think that confidence is what allows me to not think about pressure at all. So I don't think about pressure really ever, because I'm like, it doesn't matter. Even if they don't see what I'm doing, meaning like even if my audience doesn't get it. Because like let me get this straight, for example, my most recent song that you introduced when you introduced me, I've never made a song with a guitar solo at the end, ever. And that guitar solo is shredding. All right. I've never made a song with like distorted guitar at all, honestly. So it was shocking, probably for a lot of them. And I realized a lot of them aren't going to get it right away. That's fine. It's fine. It takes time. People need, like, you need to kind of show them and they need to hear it a couple times. And then they'll be like, whoa, this is insane. And then new listeners who've never heard any of my old stuff, they hear it and they're just like blown away usually, which I like. So I like that the new listeners, they'll hear it and they're like, whoa, this is insane. But my old listeners, because they're so used to my old stuff, they're just like, what are you doing? But my confidence allows me to ignore that and to think it's fine. It's fine if you guys don't get it. Because I'm gonna keep going and one day you'll get it.
Yeah. Well, I think Andre 3000 said, like, it'll go over your head and take you a second to figure out what I said. Like he said, I'm paraphrasing because he said it much more eloquently and better than I did. But it was like, it'll go over your head and it'll take you a second to catch up.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. It's going to go over their heads and it's going to take you a second to catch up. And I think that happens with music. Music needs 3 or 4 or 5 listens for you to really get what's been done in the song. Like it on a first pass, it's difficult. It's difficult to really get an appreciation of.
Yeah. So
Well,
that's my goal now.
well, man, it's great. You're doing great, which is really awesome. I love seeing artists such as yourself continuing to push, continuing to find their own creativity and just challenge what they can do. Like I think it's awesome. And before we wrap up, I have one more question for you, man. It's the only question that I plan on the show, but it's probably the toughest question I ask.
Okay.
If you had to recommend one album that everybody should listen to at least once to get an appreciation of, can be any genre of music, cannot be your own music, what would it be?
One single album. As
just
soon
for
as you
people
said,
to appreciate. Yeah.
oh yeah, I mean, as soon as you said one album, like one instantly came to mind, but I feel like it's one that everyone says, and a lot of people have heard it. So should I give that one, or should I try to think of a more obscure one?
Well, I think it's you. If it came to your mind and it's yours, like just because many people have thought about it doesn't mean it's the wrong answer.
Definitely this one, Channel Orange, Frank Ocean. Like I said, a lot of people have heard this album, so but there's a good reason for why. And what's interesting is I meet a lot of Frank Ocean fans. Frank Ocean's like one of my top artists. You know, they'll be like, Blonde is better than Channel Orange. There's this nice debate right now between Blonde and Channel Orange. Most Blonde's kind of winning. And I love Blonde, don't get me wrong. But Channel Orange, there's something so authentic about, as you were talking about earlier, the artist's story, what they're bringing to the album, what they want to share with you. There's something about Frank's journey in this moment that you can really feel in the music. And all the songs are bangers. So Channel Orange, for sure.
There you go. Channel Orange, Frank Ocean. Son Kuma came through. Please make sure you check him out. Give him some props. And yeah, if you want to talk physics and chemistry, I'm sure he's the man to do it. As we said, there's not very many artists who can delve into that world. So you might as well make some use of it. And not to mention your song, but you've also got a mixtape coming. I saw on your Instagram, What Goes Around. And I think if I'm going to quote you directly, it will drop eventually. So I'm looking forward to seeing that drop. But man, it's been fantastic talking to you. Is there anything you wanted to shout out? Anything you wanted to plug before we wrap up?
Not really. Just want to say thank you so much for having me. And to echo your sentiment, my mixtape, What Goes Around, it will drop in probably September.
Okay.
I have to put the probably. Most likely.
And if it doesn't drop in September, it will drop eventually. So don't worry, it will come. But yeah, man, it's been awesome. I'm looking forward to that album, and definitely we'll have to do this again.
Thank you so much, Aaron.